Good morning, afternoon, or evening. My name is Shannon, and from what I have learned, a lot of people's New Year's resolution is to get more into reading. So I figured I would put together some of my favorite books and recommend them to you guys. So let's just get started. Now, I am going to do this in sections, and that will become more evident as we go on. So the first section we're going to be going through is the YA section. We're first going to do YA romance. This is a romance series and a highly popular one because of the TV show, but it is the Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy. I love this series. It is very YA, but it is centered around a girl named Belly and the Fisher family, and her mom and the Fisher family's mom have been best friends for years, and so they always summer at the same place. And Conrad and Jeremiah are her two sons, and they both seem to have a thing for her, and it's complicated and messy and love triangles, and it's just really complicated, but it is really good and I would highly recommend it. Alright, the next couple books I have is a specific author, and it is K.L. Walther. She has written The Summer of Broken Rules, Maybe Meant to Be, and What Happens After Midnight. These are all very, very good books. This book is about a very, very intense game of Assassin, which is a game, if you aren't aware, but it's very, very good. And Meredith forms an alliance with one of the groomsmen because she's at her summer house for a wedding, and it's very, very good. And it also deals with grief, but it's a very interesting read. And then Maybe Meant to Be is about two best friends and their respective romances. One is between Sage and her best friend's brother, and then one is with Charlie and the new boy at school, and it's a whole very interesting story about coming out, and it's just a very good story. And then What Happens After Midnight is about Lily and Tag, and they are exes, but they're both trying to play a senior prank before their school lets out, and it's very interesting and very good. Next, these books are listed as YA. I wouldn't know. I don't think it's accurate to say it's YA because it deals with some pretty heavy subjects, but it is the Boys of Tommen series. It is absolutely excellent. These are the first 4 books in the series. We have Binding and Keeping 13, and then Saving and Redeeming 6. Now, Binding and Keeping 13 follow Johnny and Shannon, and Shannon has recently transferred to Tommen College after a specific incident has pushed her over the edge to have to transfer schools because of the bullying she was dealing with. And then on her first day at Tommen College, she gets hit in the head with a rugby ball by Johnny, and the romance just kind of goes on from there. But these books deal with some really, really serious topics like domestic abuse and alcoholism, and I want to be very clear that while they are YA in the romance, it deals with some very, very heavy subjects. Next, these are all still YA, but they are fantasy romances, so just keep that in mind. So the first series I have is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. I absolutely adore this series. I ate it up. The first book I rated, I think, 4.5 stars. Then the second and third, which is The Ballad of Never After and A Curse for True Love, I rated both of them 5 stars. I love this series. It is about Evangeline, and she prays to the Prince of Hearts to stop a wedding, and he agrees, but on the condition that she will kiss 3 people of his choosing when he says. And it just goes on from there, and there are love triangles and curses, and it's just so good. Next, this is a very, very big series. It is the Lunar Chronicles, and these are all fairy tale retellings. and they're so good. I haven't fully finished the series, but the first book, Cinder, is a Cinderella retelling, and the second book, Scarlet, is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. The third book, Cress, is a Rapunzel retelling, and then the fourth book, Winter, is a Snow White retelling. Now, I need to stress this heavily. These are not interconnected romances. You need to read this together. It is a series. I remember I read the first book and I thought they were interconnected standalones, and the way that this book ended, I was slack-jawed. I was so upset because it didn't conclude the book. But they all sound very, very good, and I absolutely adore the books that I have read of this series. And then these last two books in the series, Stars Above, is just novellas about the couples in the first four books after the main conflict is over. And then Fairest is a kind of backstory on, I'm gonna call her the Evil Queen because that's who it's retelling, but it is the backstory of the Evil Queen in this story and how it all came to be. And I love those kinds of books. Next, everyone and their mother has talked about these books and probably read them, but I feel like I have to put them in because they're basically perfect to get you into reading. And it is the Hunger Games series. I love this series. I recently reread it for the first time in like a decade, and it held up. I absolutely adored it, and I also really enjoyed the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I think, I mean, this is technically a prequel to this series, and you definitely can read it before, but I feel that you will appreciate it much more if you read the original trilogy first. Anywho, if you aren't aware what the Hunger Games series is about, it is about these 12 districts that used to be the United States and a newfound government that every year takes 2 children from each district and puts them in an arena to fight till the death. And it is very complicated and very good, and it's just that whole dystopian society trope that had seemingly all of us in a chokehold in the early 2010s. Next, we have another dystopian YA fantasy series, and that is the Shatter Me series. I adore this series. My favorite book boyfriend ever is in this series, and I absolutely love it. This series is about a girl named Juliet, and she was recently pulled out of the insane asylum where she lives to be trained to become a weapon for the reestablishment because she kills people by touching them with her bare hands. And as odd as that sounds, it's fascinating, and this series is absolutely incredible. I have one more fantasy YA series, and it is Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. This series is absolutely incredible. I would recommend everyone to read it. It's technically urban fantasy, but it is about Iris and Roman, and they are competing for a promotion at the newspaper they work at. Meanwhile, there is a war going on between the gods, and Iris's brother is away at war, and she's been writing him these letters. However, unbeknownst to her, all of her letters are going to Roman, and it is an absolutely beautiful story, and I can't wait to finish the series. This book just came out at the end of December, and I would highly recommend this. Okay, next. I literally have one adult fantasy series that I want to show you guys, and then we can go on to the adult romance books. And if you couldn't guess, it's the ACOTAR series, the A Court of Thorns and Rose series. I love this series. This is actually the series that got me super into reading. I have heard people say that the first book isn't good. I still loved it. I rated it 4.5 stars, but the story really heats up and gets a lot better in the second and third books. These are both 5 stars for me, but I do like A Court of Wings and Ruin more. I love this series. The first book is about a girl named Farah, and she has to hunt in order to keep her family alive because they are dirt poor. And one day she accidentally kills the wrong creature, and a monster comes knocking down her door to take her into the Fae realm in order to live the rest of her life out as a punishment for killing this creature. And it's very, very good. This series was originally birthed as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, if that gets any of you intrigued. But it is an absolutely incredible series, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And if you don't like the first book, keep going, because it gets so much better. Now we are moving on to romance. The first romance series I have to recommend, I have not finished, but I am currently on the first book, and I am heavily addicted already, and it is the Addicted / Cowboy Sister series. I talked about this in my last video about how I wanted to start it, and I have, and it's incredible. These books follow several different romances, but the main romance throughout the series is the one between Lily and Lo, and they have been best friends their entire lives. And a couple of years ago, they created a pact to pretend to date each other in order to enable each other's addictions. And Lauren is addicted to alcohol. He's a huge alcoholic. And Lily is actually addicted to sex. And it's an incredibly toxic bond from what I'm reading so far in the first book, but I have been assured that it gets much better. And then the other romances are between Rose and Connor and Reich and Daisy, and I have been getting snippets of these romances already in this series, and it's going to be so, so good. There's such a strong found family aspect in this series, and if you enjoy the Magnolia Parks series, which I'm actually going to talk about in a second, you will love this series. Like I just said, I'm also going to be recommending the Magnolia Parks series. This series has such a special place in my heart. I think I read all 4 of these books in 4 days. And they're just so extraordinary. So the reading order is Magnolia Parks, Daisy Hates Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home, and Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. And these 2 books follow the same timeline, but different characters. And the same goes for these 2 books. Now, I don't even know how to phrase it. I always say it's Gossip Girl in London, pretty much, because they're rich, like super duper billionaire rich, and they have these cliques and secrets and toxic romances, and it's just so good. The main romance in the Magnolia Parks books is the romance between Magnolia and BJ, who have been in love with each other for forever, and they just keep breaking each other's hearts, and it's so tragically beautiful. I don't even know how to describe it. And then the Daisy Hates books, that follows Daisy and Christian's romance, which starts out by Daisy and Christian having a friends with benefits kind of thing, but turns into so much more. And this book specifically follows a romance between Julian, who is Daisy's older brother, and a specific character who I'm not going to spoil because I think it's a good surprise. This is my favorite book ever, and I would highly, highly recommend this series to anyone if you are one of the people that would root for Blair and Chuck in Gossip Girl. because you will understand the hype of this series. Next, we're going to take a brief detour in the romance section to what I'm going to call the cowboy romance section. The first book I have for that is the first in a series, and it is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This book is about Emmy and Luke, and Emmy has just come back to town, and she goes into Luke's bar, and he's immediately fixated with her. Not to mention the fact that he's her older brother's best friend, and it's such a good romance. I know it's a short book, but it definitely, you get all the feels from this book. I absolutely adored it. I love small town cowboy ranch romances, and this definitely is one of my favorite. I rated this 5 stars, and the second book in the series comes out in March. Then we have the Edens series. This follows the Edens family, if you couldn't tell, and it's so good. I'm just gonna list out the tropes of these books real quick. It is one night stand, forced proximity, workplace, kind of next door neighbors, and single parent. This one is single dad. He is actively obsessed with her, and second chance romance. And then this one is a marriage of convenience, and they are all so good. Some weren't my favorite. Crimson River and Jasper Vale I didn't love too much, but they were still really good, and I would recommend them to everyone. Next, we are saving our favorites for last on this, because the last thing I have to mention in this little subsection is the Chestnut Springs series. I love this series so much. It is, again, based on a ranch, and the tropes, I don't know how to explain it, they just hit so hard in this series. I do not currently have the 5th one in my hands, but it's literally right over there in a specific subsection of books that I have organized, so I didn't pull it out of that. Anywho, this is workplace, boss's daughter. This is single dad, forced proximity. This is friends to lovers, and they've been in love with each other for forever. And then this book, this is my favorite book in the series. It is pregnancy trope. Don't diss it. It's done really well in this book, and he's obsessed with her. And then the last book, Hopeless, is a marriage of convenience, kind of forced proximity because they start living next to each other, and it's so good. Okay, that is all for this subsection. Now, back into the romance. We have the Twisted series. I love this series, but there is something deeper going on with every single one of these books. Like, there is a deeper plot going on, which I usually really appreciate in romance books. Anywho, Twisted Love, the first in the series, is a brother's best friend forced proximity trope. Twisted Games is a bodyguard romance. Twisted Hate is a best friend's brother trope and enemies with benefits. And then Twisted Lies is a forced proximity because he's her landlord, and fake dating, and it's just, they're all so good. I would say my favorite is Twisted Hate, quickly followed by Twisted Lies. I love them. I love them all so much. This is a small town romance. This is the book that got me into reading romance, and it is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. I do have the special edition because I love it so much, but this book is about Archer and Bree. Bree has recently moved to this small town after something absolutely tragic happened to her, and she's looking to start over, and she ends up meeting Archer, and he does not speak, but coincidentally she speaks sign language, and she has realized that he is a bit of a town outcast, and she puts forth the effort to build a friendship with him, and it's just such a beautiful story, and I absolutely adore this book and Archer and everything about this book. Next, we're going into another subsection of romance books that I'm going to be calling dark romance. The first series I have is the Never After series by Miss Emily McIntyre. I love this series. Hooked is the first book in the series, and I rated this 5 stars. I adore this book. It is a fractured fairy tale of Wendy and Hook, and it's so good. I find personally that this series is kind of pretty easy to predict, but I still enjoy it so much. Then the next book in the series, Scarred, is a Lion King retelling. Wretched, this was the one I was most excited to get to, is a Wizard of Oz retelling where Evie, the main female character, grows poppies to make opium for her father's drug distribution. The next book is Twisted, and this was an Aladdin retelling. And then Crossed. This was the one I had the most problems with, is a Hunchback of Notre Dame retelling where the priest murders people. He's a serial killer. So it was a little odd, but I did still really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend that series to anyone wanting to get into dark romance. The next series is the Brutal Birthright series. I do have all of the books in the series, but when I ordered them from Amazon, 2 of them came in the absolutely ugly photograph versions where it's a large paperback and there's like a shirtless dude on the cover, so I'm not going to display that for you. But we have Brutal Prince, Stolen Heir, Savage Lover, and Bloody Heart. I have only read the first 2 books in the series, but it is absolutely astounding. The first book is about Ada and Calum, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they are rivals of mafia families, and they end up having an arranged marriage to create an alliance between these 2 feuding families, and they legitimately hate each other. I mean, she eats a food he's allergic to right before their kiss on their wedding day to give him an allergic reaction. But it is a very good series. And then this book is about Nessa, and Nessa is Calum's little sister, and she has recently been kidnapped by Nicolaj, and she's a ballerina. She wants nothing really to do with her family. While she's being held captive, she starts to create a ballet about what she's going through, and throughout this they start to form a bond, and it's so good. The rest of the books in the series, I'm not too sure what the plot and tropes are, but I know that they all follow specific members of the Griffin and Gallo family, which was the original families from the first book, and I'm just very excited to finish reading these. The last series that I'm going to be recommending is with a very large grain of salt, because these books are incredibly dark and kind of sickening at parts of them, and I want you all to be very aware of that going into this. And if you have an inclination to read it, read all of the trigger warnings, because I don't want any of you to be unprepared if you decide to read these books. Anywho, it is the Cat and Mouse duet, which is Haunting and Hunting Adeline. These are very dark books, especially the second one, where a stalker and the woman he's stalking fall in love. Like I said, take the biggest grain of salt possible. The stalker is also a vigilante who hunts down people who sex trafficking, human trafficking, and he frees their victims. He's a very morally gray person, but he also is doing something really super heroic. Anywho, it's good. I really enjoyed the first book. I kind of had to skip the first half of the second book for reasons I won't explain because it'll give away a spoiler, but I would recommend the series nonetheless. With all of the books laying before me, this video is now over. I hope you guys got some good recommendations if you want to start reading. And make sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up for more book-related videos. All of my social media will be linked down in the description. Make sure to turn on the post notification bell so you guys can get notified right when I post a new video. I hope you all are having an absolutely wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the world, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!